everybody. So thanks so much for showing up today. We are kicking off Collab Friday, which is a series of meetups on Discord, and we're going to do that every Friday from now on. We're still testing the setup, so if anything shakes or breaks today, my sincere apologies. We will for sure learn from the experience today and come back stronger next week. So just a kind ask to be patient with us. But anyway, I'm Sandra. I'm looking after community here at Cohere. And today I am joined by William Eustis and Malcolm Forsyth, if I butchered your surnames. Super sorry about that. So the guys are part of the winning team of this year's TOHacks hackathon, where they teamed up to build Interview4tech, an app that uses Cohere's generate endpoint and produces NLP-powered interview experience that can help to prep for technical job interviews. So the idea for today is to see the demo of the app and then ask a couple of questions around how it was built, how it came together. So please mute yourselves until the Q&A section. I will let you know when that starts. And I guess we can kick off with the demo. So William, Malcolm, thank you so much for joining me today. And over to you. Please show us what you have built with Interview4tech and what it's all about.
Hey, okay, awesome. I'm still trying to get it on the laptop since this is one it's not on currently. So either I guess Malcolm can share or we can just use the video demo. I think either one would probably work just fine.
Okay, yeah, I think the video demo would be better. My screen share seems to I've been having some issues with Discord and screen sharing. It just quits out every time I try to share my screen or my video. You said we have a video demo?
Yeah. Sandra, do you think you can actually share the video on my phone here? Sorry, we're having
absolutely.
Difficulties, it seems.
Absolutely. Alrighty.
Do you guys want to narrate the video?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, actually, I'm fine with that. Let's do it.
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, this is actually maybe better because we can sort of talk about it not in hackathon format, but for our app, we created a tool called Tech. Demo4tech is sort of our thought process behind it was a little bit of a better interview tool. So there's interview tools online where you do it with a human, but sometimes those are expensive and hard to schedule, and maybe the human doesn't know a lot about your specific field. And there's interview tools online where you do it with a robot. And those aren't very interactive, and I think they're bad.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, so we wanted to make something that uses some of the large language modeling to have a fairly interactive interview process and have the interviewing robot build off of your answers to the previous questions. So that's why we used Cohere's generate endpoint. So here you can see us starting to interact with it. So I believe Eustis, it first asks you what the role is that you're applying for, because that gives it a lot of context. And then here it is asking, after Eustis responds with machine learning engineer, it's responding by asking what the cursive dimensionality is. And you can see it's giving a question on top of that.
Yeah. So, sort of from a user interaction standpoint, while our GUI is very bad because we don't know how to do any design work, the way it's sort of functional is you hit the record button and you respond to whatever question it has prompted you. It's going to take that response and it's going to do two things with it. First, it'll generate feedback, which you can see with the poorly placed text at the bottom of the screen. And this feedback is both sort of calculated, so calculating words per minute, calculating how many ums you say, and if you have long pauses. And it's also open-ended. So we actually have another model, or another prompt, I should say, that generates feedback based on your responses. So it'll say, listen, you didn't really go in depth enough, and XYZ. It's hard to give an example on this one because, again, it chooses what to say, right? Maybe it says you did an excellent job and it was a perfect response, but maybe it also says, you didn't go in depth enough. So once you have that response, the other place it goes is to the next question generation model. So both each question and the feedback is generated by a large language model. And the idea here is, it's given sort of a transcript of the previous conversation. And so our hope is that, it can really start to focus more specifically on what your interest is and ask questions related to that field. We found large language models have sort of domain knowledge of, pretty much every field, right? Maybe not every single niche field, but many, many fields, enough to sort of practice interviews for, especially at sort of an intern or new hire level. And so this is, sort of the concept behind the project. Any questions before we start to maybe talk a little bit about the implementation? Awesome. So in that case, the way we actually ran it was exclusively sort of through front end. So we pushed all of our API keys, which is great practice, I've heard, and just had everything run through JavaScript on the user's browser. And so the first step is sort of speech to text. So that's using Assembly's API to transcribe what you're saying into text. And then we format it into a prompt, and we send that to Cohere's language models. Now, of course, we need to sort of have different prompts. And to have different prompts, we need a lot of good data. Our original plan was to have fine-tuned models, but the fine-tuned models, I think, took a little bit too long to fine-tune within the hackathon time limit because we were slow in generating all of our data. And so the way we do generate that data, though, which we use for the prompts, is first we sort of found a list of questions online and fed that to a model and had it generate more questions like these. And then we pick our favorite ones and keep them and remove our least favorite ones. Then we picked, some of our favorites of those and generated answers. And then we would give it a randomly, selected question from that new list of questions and have the model predict an answer. And then, question, answer. Once again, keeping the good answers, removing the bad answers. And then one more time, we take the question answer pairs and respond to some of the ones with feedback and then give those to the model. And so we have question, answer, feedback. And, what's nice about this is the question, the answer, and the feedback, in many cases, are all generated. And so this allowed us to have good question, answer, feedback pairs, which allows us to generate new questions based on previous answers, as well as feedback on those answers.
Yeah, so we had a list of question answer pairs that the model would get for its prompt, but we also had the previous few question answer responses from the user, but we always kept in the question of what the job title was and the user's answers, just so it had a domain to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's sort of the meat and potatoes of the implementation, I would say. I think one thing we were really proud of is sort of using generated responses to generate more generated responses, which is good. You can see some of them on the screen right now. If you look on the right-hand bar of my VS Code, you'll see we have a large list of just different, I think this first part is questions and then it's question, answer, response pairs. But yeah, it was really, really fun and a great time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the improvised video narration. How do I stop streaming? Okay, that way. Awesome. Alrighty, so I guess we can move on to Q&A. I have tons of questions, obviously, since I'm really curious when it comes to generally building anything with Cohere platform, how it works. What was your experience? What was your thought process behind it? So, but first, I want to check if anybody else has any questions.
Yeah. The one question, you guys said you throw away the bad ones for questions and for answerings. How are you guys doing that?
Yeah, so we're just reading them at the end of the day, right? It's sort of very expensive to write a question, answer, response pair, and it's very easy to read one and determine if it's good or bad. And so when the model's generating them, we have it generate one, we spend a second to read it, and then we say generate the next one, which, it's still expensive, but we only needed, I think, 150 or so good, question, answer, response pairs. And so, it ended up taking much, much longer than 150 seconds, but it took much shorter than having to write all of them, right?
Yeah, it wasn't too long.
I do think in the future, having, if you needed to sort of scale this up, I think it would be not too difficult to sort of fine tune a language model to determine if a question answer or if a response to a question answer pair is good, and then have that do the predictions. Now, this raises questions on, if this language model can actually predict if it's good or not, why can't this language model generate it? But I think this is a simpler task than this, so I think it's maybe not too difficult, or not too sort of out of left field to try to do that. Yeah, great question.
Okay, Nick, do you have follow-up questions, or anybody else wants to jump in?
Just a quick question. Can you speak a little bit? You mentioned how many pairs you have. What kind of coverage? How many topics? How many questions per topic, so to speak? Just off the top of your head, do you sort of
yeah, great question.
Talk about that data?
I think we had probably about 30 general questions, so not specific to a specific sort of career or field, with question answer pairs. Usually with those general ones, we had, I think, 2 answers per question, just for some variety. And
yeah,
then,
good and bad.
Yeah, and then in terms of variety of actual careers, we mostly stuck to tech because at some point we need to evaluate if the answers are good and give good feedback. And so we have project management, front end, machine learning, full stack development. I think we have 3 more, but
maybe back end.
Yeah, we had full front end, full stack, back end, UI UX. There was, I think, 1 or 2 more, but for each of those, we probably have 15 or so sort of domain specific question answer pairs. Yeah. But okay, maybe our answers for the UI UX weren't as good. You saw it. We take pride in the technology, but maybe not the look of it.
That sounds good.
It's splash page. So.
Awesome. So my question is actually, I'm curious. Whenever there's this like initial process of coming up with an idea, and then like this initial friction of trying to go and execute it with a particular tool. So I was curious if that was your first choice to create this interview tool, and then how easy / how hard it was to transition from like thinking about it into actually putting it into the basic blocks.
I think this was basically the first idea we thought of. We were tooling around. We also wanted to use another like tool from the hackathon. So we were trying to like combine for multiple prompts, and that one was a speech to text. And we were like, okay, like what can we do with speech to text, then text to text, and then like pretty early in we were like, oh, we can do like some kind of interview bot. And then from there, we didn't really change ideas, and I think it took a good chunk of time to kind of like get the app started and like have everything like start to have a basis of a front end. But I think it only took a couple hours before we were really like working we were pretty clearly working towards that idea, and I think we got started on that idea pretty quickly. If that's you can correct me if I'm wrong, Eustis, but that's pretty much what I remember.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we were, it's sort of easy to use the prizes as maybe inspiration on what to do, right? And so we saw there was a speech to text, we saw there was text to text. There was also a database one with like a SQL server, which for a long time, I think we wanted to include some sort of like backend database to this. But then, like 10 or 12 hours in when we're actually making it, it takes a really long time to get anything working at all. And, we had only really done sort of the front end side of this. We had some back. The original plan was to have front end, back end sort of classic server stuff and not push our tokens. But then we sort of asked ourselves, okay, wait, we need to now add an entire database, and we've already spent this long, and so we we scrapped the database and kept the rest of it. But yeah, it was I think from experience, if you swap your project idea after like the first 6 hours, no one's happy. No one has a good time, right? Because it sort of just never ends that well. So I knew that we wanted to pick something early on and just stick with it. And I'm glad we picked a good idea.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. So when it comes to like basically these like quite substantial prompts are a very important component of the whole application. I'm curious, what was the most challenging in creating these prompts for you?
Yeah, I think so. We had all this. We're again, as I sort of alluded to earlier, we're not that good at web dev. I think we have some good like ML experience, but with sort of web dev stuff, it was not our forte, and so we had a couple long-term blocking issues on that. Just getting everything to run, and having to understand everything. From the ML side, actually generating good prompts proved to be really not very trivial. It required a lot of tuning of frequency penalty and temperature and top K and all this sort of stuff, right? I mean we got to work in stop sequences just so it wouldn't keep rambling on about random unrelated things and waste my time, and that's why it ended up taking probably like 4 or 5 hours at like the hours of 1 to 5 a.m. to generate all of the prompts. But yeah, I guess that's hackathon, right?
Yeah, though I think it was like the main first chunk of time was just getting the application running to the point where we could use it, so we could get a sense of what what we could do tooling around the prompts, and then from there, it wasn't too bad to tool around with them and change the different parameters. But it was a large chunk of time getting it to a place where we could interact with it well enough to see how well it was doing.
Yeah, we did a good job sort of separating it at the beginning. So we had the model generation API call, which just some like set timeout function that generated like this is response tags, and so we were able to all the website dev happening here, have the model API interaction stuff happening here, and then tying them together was relatively easy in the grand scheme of things, but it had its own problems.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, but we were pushing up on the deadline for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody? Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in.
Yeah. Can you guys share your prompts?
Yeah, sure. So they're in the GitHub. Malcolm, can you send the link to the GitHub where they are?
Yeah, give me a sec.
I don't know. They're not in some else. They're actually
I have the GitHub link. So yeah, sending it in the chat.
That'd be perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we wanted to
cool.
fine-tune model, and I do think a fine-tuned model would perform better. We actually ended up fine-tuning it, but it finished after we demoed. So I actually haven't gone back and evaluated if it would be better or worse. But is there a way to sort of share fine-tuned models on Cohere? Is that functional? I can also potentially add that to the GitHub if there's interest.
There is not currently. If you fine-tune a model, like you're the only person who has access to it. You can share prompts, like you can make a prompt and then save it and share it, but fine-tune models are restricted to whoever made them.
The specific user, is there interest?
Oh, the specific organization. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, well in that case, I'll test it out tonight, and maybe I'll just add some of the fine-tuned prompts to the GitHub. Interested. It should be relative. I'll just use the same prompts, but now on a fine-tuned model, so it should be relatively easy for me to do.
Oh yeah, that would be great. So do you feel like you've learned you've learned some tips that you could share with like a younger brother that would participate in a similar hackathon using Cohere right now after this experience? Was there anything that like helped you to understand how to work with it after this?
Yeah. You go first, Malcolm. I got to think about that.
Yeah, I bet there are kind of tips around the kind of setting up an app that like we spent a lot of time doing various setup things where I think like just the most simple kind of create React app whatever kind of framework would have been best. I think definitely the things I'm happy that we did were picking an idea early and sticking to it. Our idea was a bit ambitious, but I'm pretty happy that there was no we weren't done early. We could always keep adding things. We were like pushing up against the deadline. And I think going for multiple prompts, like using a couple different prompts in the hackathon to like sketch together an idea, like how do we hit these 3 prompts, kind of builds an idea out of itself because it really restricts what you could be doing.
Yeah, for sure. I think from my perspective, I think I spent a lot of time trying to automate the generation of different question answer pairs and question answer response pairs. Probably more than it would have taken to just, I'm the same perspective as I think a lot of you, which is like, how do you, someone asked earlier, how do you throw away the bad responses? I'm sitting here, I'm not going to read these. This is something that needs to be automated. And so I spent like probably 2 hours trying to find like a solid way to automate it, doing like, TF-IDF to make sure it stays on topic. And then, let's do a classification model and, fine tune it. And then like at a certain point, I was like, okay, I've just spent 2 hours doing this. I could easily spend another 2, or I could spend 1 hour actually generating them and doing it by hand, right? So sometimes the at least for small n, right, for small n in a hackathon, I think the biggest tip I would give is, sometimes just do a little bit of manual labor on the data generation because it needs to be very high quality, right? Especially if we don't have a huge number of examples. It needs to have good variety, needs to have good specificity. And so that was a challenge for sure.
Got it. And was it easy to generate new questions and answers that sort of made sense and fit the bill, matched your expectations when it comes to what you want the platform to generate next time?
Yeah, I think it was easy to do technically, but I was just sort of reading for like 4 hours straight. And like having to actually analyze it, which is like sort of mentally exhausting, especially when it's again like 1 to 5 a.m. And so that was less easy, but it wasn't particularly difficult, right? You're just sort of evaluating if something is a good pair or not, which is like, I don't have to. It's not a longer sequence, so it's not too bad, right?
I definitely think it made it a little harder that a lot of the like ML debugging came after like 10 hours of grinding out a functional app, which was fairly mind-numbing. And then we have to do the part that is significantly more thoughtful, but it's in the the dark hours of the night, and we're all tired. So that was definitely one of the challenges.
Yeah, I ended up just offloading some of the to Malcolm. Jordan. Yeah, so that wasn't too bad.
Okay, cool. Anybody wants to jump in for the question? Any thoughts?
Not a question, but a comment. This was super cool. Thank you for sharing it. It's a really cool application. I hadn't seen something use generate to both create prompts and then evaluate them before. Like that's super cool.
Yeah, that was what I was the most excited about too. I mean, I'm sure someone has done it somewhere before, but it works quite well. It was quite easy, right? So I think it's nice. Maybe I think there's definitely sort of larger applications of this technique, but that's for next hackathon, right?
Yeah, like building on that, actually, I wanted to ask whether you have any plans to continue working with it. Have you like tested it across a couple of users? Whether you're gonna, what's the future for it? Is it going to sit on your GitHub as a
I think
thing?
See how good this fine-tuned model is, and if it's good, I see no reason why not to actually make this sort of live. obviously we'll need to rework the back end a bit, which is I think like the largest thing that is convincing me not to immediately do it, right? Just because that's a lot of work. But we can't push our API keys to everyone's website, so we'd have to sort of separate front end, back end. But yeah, I mean, it would just take like another weekend, right? But yeah, it's certainly an interesting project, and I think it could help a lot of people. Malcolm and I go to the University of Illinois, and we have sort of career services, and they do mock interviews, even for sort of specific topics. But I mean, I've done it once or twice, and it's okay. It's great for sort of behavioral level stuff, but when it starts getting technical, this interviewer is another student who's very likely not in your field, right?
Yeah.
They're just very limited on how technical they can get. No discredit to that, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited about the future of the project, and keeping my fingers crossed for you. I'm also gonna be happy to help you out if you need anything with it in the future. So, guys, final ask if you have any questions. If not, we can wrap up, I guess, for today. Alrighty. So, William, Malcolm, again, thank you so much for joining us today. That was a super, super fun thing to check out your revisit, actually, because I saw the demo of the app already. But share it with other community members. And again, fingers crossed for the future of your app. And let's keep in touch. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Take care and see you next Friday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Bye.